Okay. So you're talking. Hi everyone. There seems to be no chair today. Could I ask? I'm going to be doing a live demo of Track when it's my turn to speak. So it's probably better if you move towards the front of the class because you might not see it all from the back of the class. So rather than moving in a few minutes, if you could move towards the front of the room. We've got Deans talking for 5 minutes to begin with about an opioid conversion tool. Today's May the 4th, so he's going to do a Star Wars joke, and then I might do a Star Wars joke at some point in the future.
Been dropped in it slightly there, I think. So yeah, how do I know what Darth Vader's getting for Christmas, Richard? Because I felt his presence. That's my best attempt. So I'm Dean's, not renowned for my jokes or my puns, palliative care consultant here in Tayside. I just wanted to present just 5 minutes a validation study that we're doing in a clinical decision aid app for opioid conversion. It's called SPOT, so Safer Prescribing Opioids Tool. I'll just go through that. Now, which one is this one? So what's SPOT? Basically, it's a CE-marked Class 1 medical device, so any apps that help make clinical decisions actually have to go through accreditation process. CE is the European marks, that's the old British standards, European, that may come back to us. It's a double-check device, so it's not taking away the responsibility for converting from one opioid to another from the clinician, but it's there when you're thinking, have I got that right? Can you double-check it? And this might save phoning a friend, etc. It's programmed at the moment to be an application that's web-based, but the future would be a downloadable app. The way it's worked is it can work offline as well as online and just uploads data later. We've linked this to Scottish standards, so the palliative care guidelines, and they take their conversion algorithms out of the SIGN guidelines, which is peer-reviewed. And we're also linking in according to Tayside's pharmacy and formulary lists as well. And the idea with this is it can be used throughout anyone care in terms of opioid conversion, primarily in palliative care, but it could be in pain medicine as well, non-medical prescribers as well as medical prescribers. So the SPOT study is really to validate, does the tool do what it says in the tin, and does it get the maths right, and does it work well in terms of usability. So we're hoping to get around about 200 conversions done through the tool, and then that's powered to look for validity in that, and then run alongside that some qualitative focus groups around the usability of the tool itself. Okay, so at the moment we're recruiting both from primary care and secondary care. General practitioners are very enthused about this tool. They maybe do 10 conversions in a year is the sort of feedback for that. So obviously if you're doing this infrequently, it's quite nice to have something in your pocket that adds confidence to that process. Palliative care is involved. 200s are minimum to get powered study, but actually in terms of the usability side, we'd like to get more. So participation, basically, is you sign up, you get an email, you get welcomed, you activate your account. Joanna does this all for us. And there's a questionnaire, a very quick SurveyMonkey questionnaire about your confidence and knowledge around opioid conversions and what you might think about an app. And then at the end of that, that's repeated around the actual experience of the app, and then a focus group that's optional. Okay, so it was 5 minutes. I promised Drew, I think I hit it roughly. That's the website there, slightly hard to see, so it's spotstudy@opioidcalculator.co.uk. You can't access it just now other than in the trial, and it might be that Joanna, who's the research assistant supporting this trial, might come and speak to you about signing up, depending how we're doing in terms of number of participants. So, thank you for listening.
I'm just going to try and turn down the lights a wee bit to make life better. So, I'm here to talk to you today about TrakCare, which is going to be coming to NHST side at the end of June. Where we are with it and what the future might hold. So to give you an idea of why we're doing it rather than just what we're doing at the moment, because if you look at what we're doing in the first stage, it may not seem that exciting from the point of view of clinicians, because it's going to change the way you do a little bit of stuff, but it's not going to impact majorly on how you manage your patients. But in the future, it will have the ability to do an awful lot for us. So what are we doing at the moment? We're implementing the Track patient admin system. So this is going to replace Topaz. Topaz is the admin system we've had running over the last 10 years or so. And Topaz is an admin system, and it can't do anything but be an admin system. So it's reached the point where it's reached what it's capable of doing, and the question is do we then integrate it with electronic patient record, or do we move across to a patient admin system which has the ability to be a patient record at the same time? And the easier option in terms of interoperability is to actually switch from our current PAS to the Track PAS. The reason we've chosen the Track PAS is that the Scottish Government tell us that if we change our PAS, we use the Track PAS. We're changing the ED system from Symphony, which is a silo system at the moment, so no one knows what happens to a patient in ED because they keep their own records. That's because there's been difficulty in trying to integrate that with the hospital systems. So we're going to move ED onto Track, which means that discharge letters and interactions between patients and the ED department will be visible to clinicians throughout the hospital. We're going to change from our RMS system to the Track referral management system. That's been quite a big job. It might not sound like a big job, but because RMS is sort of a best of breed in-house development, we've been having to work quite closely with the people who supply Track to give us a referral management system which is up to a certain standard. It still is not probably quite as intuitive as RMS, but we're working with them to try and improve that. The other thing that we're going to do is bring the maternity system into Track. At the moment, it's on a legacy system called Protos. It has no interfaces, and all the data is manually entered into Protos. So it allows us to see a pregnant woman, should she go to ED, or a pregnant woman who's coming to a diabetes clinic or to a renal clinic, and see what's going on within the other parts of their healthcare. So it's joining up the person into one record, because at the moment we have fragmentation. Now, to do the patient admin system, you'd think it's just by taking letters and taking patients from one system and putting them into appointments in another system. But actually, it's been a huge bit of work. And the complexity in an organisation of NHST size has been great. What we need to do is we need to think about different things that the patient admin system allows us to do. So we need to be able to get the patients to the right place. So we have to migrate all the patients from the current system to the Track system. In Tayside, we run 16,000 different clinics on a yearly basis, and there's 16,000 active clinics. So we've actually had to build all these clinics in Track, and we've had to map the data from Topaz into Track, so the patients move from Topaz into Track when we go live. And data migration is probably the key bit which we're still working on in terms of ensuring that our validity of our data so that we don't lose patients. At the present time, we're sitting around about 95, 96% when we do a dummy run. So we've got 4% still to get right. And every time we do a dummy run, we understand new bugs and glitches and we change things. And then that improves the data migration. We need to get letters out to patients to tell them where they're coming to and what they need to do, whether or not they need to fast for their procedure or whether or not they need to bring a urine specimen or whatever. So we need to have different letters for different specialties. We need to have coding because ISD and the Scottish Government need us to give them information back so they can see what work Tayside is doing. We need to be able to report, so we need to be able to have an idea of what our activity is and how many appointments are being seen, how many people aren't meeting their TTGs and RTT outcomes, so that we can then focus on where we need to deploy extra resource, for example, or get people working in a different way to improve the flow of patients. And we need to be able to map our inpatients across, so we need to be able to take the patients who are in the wards and move them into the new wards in TrakCare. So we need to build all the wards that we have in Tayside. So rather than giving you lots of screenshots, I'm actually just going to go into a live demo of Track. So when you click on the TrakCare link, you'll get taken into a login screen and you log in. And you, as a doctor, you only have that bottom one, the Nine Wells Hospital XCXX doctor. I have some other ones because I do different things with it. And it brings you into a screen. Now, that screen allows you to see what's going to happen today. And this is an unconfigured screen, so you can configure your screen to make it work better for you. So if I scroll down, I'm not doing anything at midnight in terms of outpatient clinics. I don't know if anyone is. The gastroenterologist might be James, but you can see that this afternoon I have some patients in my outpatient clinic. So I can set up my preferences on this so it makes it look nicer for me. So I can start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's a tutorial which will be online which will show you how to do this. And then all I want to know is my 7-day view and my today view of what's going on, and then I press update, and then that will give me a little bit less of a view and allows me just to see what's going on this afternoon. I can look at all my patients who are coming in this afternoon because I can see their electronic patient record there. So if I click on the EPR button for a patient, I've not got their name in there, have I? I've not clicked on their name. Just give me a sec. So if I click on Amy Claret here, and I go into Amy's electronic patient record by clicking on that little icon there, which is similar to the one that the BMA uses. I think it comes from one of the Greek. Is it? I should know it. Is it Apollo? Is the healing god? And you can see that Amy's got some stuff in her record, or does she? Amy's been wiped and clean. That's because I'm in Caroline Aitken. So I go into Amy, and Amy has some referral documents there. So you can see the referrals that she has, and if there's a document she's been sent electronically, you'll be able to see the electronic document there. I'll take you into a patient who has that. You can see a clinical assessment if you've had anything done. So you can add presenting complaints. You can add vital signs, and Amy has some vital signs there. If the patient has an alert, say they have learning difficulties or they have need for a sign language interpreter, things like that, or they need an interpreter, that will be marked in the patient alerts area. So you won't need to go into Topaz to be able to see what your patient's additional needs are. It will be there and visible for you, and that will be the same for inpatients and for outpatients. You'll be able to see diagnoses for patients, and I'll take you into a patient who's got some diagnoses in a minute. And you can even put clinical notes in. So potentially in the future, rather than writing clinical notes or having the surgeons go around with their dictaphones at the moment, and then it goes onto a sticker, and the sticker then gets stuck into the case notes. It's quite an efficient way of getting a good note for the patient, but the secretaries could actually type that note into TrakCare directly rather than typing it onto a sticker, because that sticker needs to find the right case notes. And some of the surgeons do safari ward rounds, so it may not be the best thing. So if we come out of Amy there for a minute and we go into our outpatient work list, and I click on today's outpatient clinic in PRI, and you can see all the patients I have who are coming to clinic. When the patient arrives at clinic, all that the reception staff need to do is check the usual things. So have you changed your date of birth? Have you changed address? Is your GP the same? And if that's all the same, the reception staff need to do is tick to say that the patient has arrived. And you can see that that patient's gone from black to green as they've arrived in the clinic. That means that patient will be getting processed through, and when the notes reach your trolley outside your room, the patient will be ready to be seen. Now, when you've seen the patient, one of the things that we'd be very keen to do for as many clinics as possible is that we deliver an outcome for the clinic directly from the electronic system, rather than having paper outcomes. The reason for this is that in Tayside last year there were 40,000 missing outcomes for patients. Now, some of them might be people have been discharged, or some of them might be they didn't attend their appointment at all and they've not had an outcome. But there is a clinical risk from having patients who've come along, seen someone, and don't have an outcome, because they might actually need a test, or they might need another appointment, and unless there's an outcome there, there's no way to follow that patient through the pathway, and you might miss people from coming back. So to do an outcome, it's very straightforward. If you use an outcome sheet at the moment, there's several boxes that you need to tick on your outcome sheet. So I click on the little pink button there, and it brings up an RTT outcome, which is the national reporting outcome. So I've discharged this patient, and that's all I would need to do for that patient. Now, if that patient needed another appointment, this is not set up for my clinics, or onward referral, and then you can set up a next appointment date. You don't have to do that there. What we normally do is in that outcome box, when it's configured for each specialty, it will have 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. So if you want to, and you can specify an actual date if you wish to, but you can just click 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whenever you want to see that patient out to 6 months or a year. And then you press update and close, and then that's that patient outcomed, and they've arrived, they've been outcomed, and that's them finished at the clinic. They then go from there, from your clinic room, back to the reception desk if they need to get another appointment on that day, and they pick up their appointment, because the reception staff will just ask them their name. They'll know to look on that clinic list, and they'll be able to see what that outcome is. So it's very straightforward, and I think there's been a lot of worry amongst clinicians about this, and the fact it's going to take an awful lot of additional time. If your patients don't get appointments on the day, I know the diabetes service, for example, don't give appointments out on the day. Once you've done that outcome box, the patient can just leave the clinic unless they've got bloods or they need to see someone else at that clinic. So, from the point of view of outpatients, that is all that we're asking you to do. It's very easy to find your outpatients, because when you arrive at clinic or when you log into Track and you look at today's view, you'll be able to see all your patients there. And if you spot, there's the outcome box there on your first page, so you don't even have to go into your outpatient work list. You can actually just go into your login page, and you can do your outpatient clinic from there. Now, if you go into the electronic, this icon list is going to change in the production system. So at the moment we've got the EPR and we've got the outcomes box. The other icons which are going to be there are a clinical portal icon, which will take you in context into clinical portal, a box to take you directly to requesting on ICE, a box to take you to results for the patient on ICE, and a box to take you into PACS in context as well. So you'll be able to open all those things in context directly from your Track system, rather than having to type the CHI 4 or 5 times into different systems to get that information. This is the test. I'm in the system called Scratch, which is the play system, and this sort of stuff's coming into Base, which is the production system, which I'm not allowed to touch, because I'm not allowed to mess it up and muck around with it. So that's what happens for outpatients. Now, if you want to know what's happening in your ward, At the moment, you have to go onto Clinical Portal, then pull down Ward View from Clinical Portal, or go into your patient list on Clinical Portal to get a list of patients who are in your ward. You click on ward, you can set up your preferences there to which ward you want to see, and you can see multiple wards if you so wish. So if you're a chest physician, you might want to be able to get into AMU easily, and into medical HDU, and into ward 3. Or you might want to get into all the medical wards and all the surgical wards, because you might have borders on every ward in the hospital. But if you click on your floor plan for your ward, you can see where the patients are and which beds they're in. So we've got John Bon Jovi, Billy Brown, Joanne Brown, and Mr. Scary Klein. So if we go into Joanne Brown for a minute, and I click on Joanne's EPR, and it should pop up. And if I go into her referral documents and I go into waiting list, you'll see that she's got some referral documents there. And I can click on that, and I can see her referral document from the GP. My screen resolution changes because I'm on the big display. It's better when I'm not on a big display, but you can see the Sky Gateway document just like you would in Clinical Portal or RMS. So it's very quick and easy to get referral documents within TrakCare. And any documents just have an e-referral will have that. And if there's any images there, which there aren't for any of these, the images will be up at the top, and there'll be thumbnails of all the images which come along. So for specialties like dermatology or ophthalmology or ENT, where they might have clinical pictures with the patient, those attachments will be there, or PFTs or whatever from the community. So rather than them being scrolled down at the bottom on RMS, they're at the top on TrakCare. Now, if I come out of Joanne, I go into Scary Klein. And I go into Scary Klein's clinical record. So Scary Klein's, he's a renal patient. So if we look at his patient history, he's got a kidney transplant which has failed, he's got chronic renal failure, and he's got polycystic kidney disease. And we can add information about patients. Now, we're not going to do this initially, or we're not going to ask people to do this initially, but in the future, it will be really useful to know what diagnoses our patients have. At the moment, the only information that we have on who our patients are is based on outcome data for inpatients, so SMR data, which goes from the coders after someone leaves the hospital and goes to ISD, and then we get a report back saying, we've had so many people in with COPD and they've got these complications. We have no idea, apart from specialties who have their own bespoke clinical records, what the diagnosis of the people that we see in clinic are. And if we add, for example, hepatitis C onto this, we'd be able to say, well, as long as everyone is doing it and populating the clinical record appropriately, we could actually say, well, out of the liver clinic, 40% of them have hepatitis C, potentially. So we can start to interrogate the clinical record to give us information about what we're doing in more detail than we have at the moment. Now, the other things which we can do is we can record procedures. Now, procedures, if they happen in radiology, are really well recorded because we can find them on the clinical information system in PACS. But if they happen in the wards, there'll be a sticker, potentially, or there'll be a handwritten note about what procedure has been done. So if we go into procedures, you can, at the moment we've got it configured predominantly for ED procedures, but there's also, here we go, I put in some procedures. So the patient's on renal dialysis. He's had an insertion of a central venous catheter, and he's had transplantation of a kidney. So you can see what he's had done in the past. So insertions of central venous catheters and stuff isn't quite useful to do because we have a quality bundle for these sorts of things, but it's all in patient records. It's not collected electronically, so we don't actually have a good denominator of how many central lines we're putting in, when we're putting them in, what the indication for putting them in is. And if we go back into his clinical assessment, you'll see that I put in a questionnaire to tell us about his central line insertion. So here you can see that I put in a central venous catheter, which 3 lumens, and it was for an emergency. And being a good doctor, I did all the right things in terms of ticking the right boxes. So, and then we can, and for junior doctors doing this, it gives them a way of giving them a denominator or a number potentially of procedures that they've done. So rather than having to collect it in the future, potentially in a logbook, you'll be able to collect this information on track. And then if we work with common procedures, we might be able to organise reports to come out to individual trainees of the number of procedures that they've done, which would be a really good step forward in terms of quality of logbooks. It also, if you outcome someone from clinic, it will also mark that you've seen them in clinic. So if you're a registrar and you outcome someone, it's a way of validating the fact that you've seen that patient in clinic, rather than at the moment you guys keep your clinic lists and you tick which patients you've seen, and then you put that into a database, and then you take that along to your ARC-P for next year's training. There's things that the nurses have to do, such as malnutrition screening tools. That's just an example, there's a questionnaire already developed within TRAC. And the MUST score is done weekly for patients who are in hospital. And if the MUST score changes, there should be actions in terms of dietetic referral and things like that. And the hospital gets marked against quality indicators by the Scottish Government on things like this. And it's one of the things which has come out of some of the quality inspections. So not only can you put in a questionnaire for it, it will actually calculate your score. So if you put in the patient's height and weight and how much weight they've lost, it will then give you what percentage of BMI that is. You tick the box. Are they unwell otherwise? And it will give you a MUST score. Now, that's not a great amount of tech to do that, but having that within the clinical record rather than having it on a bit of paper in the nursing case notes and then the senior nurse having to go around and audit data on that is a significant improvement. So these are all things that we may well be able to do in the future by just having the system that we're putting in at the moment. The other things we can do are we can actually add stuff to the clinical record. So if I wanted, I've already put in a document in here just to check that you're still awake. But if you want to put in a new document, you could do so. And so, because we're in One Scary Clown's record, I thought it'd be quite nice to be able to put in a photo of One Scary Clown. So here we go. And I can update and I can put in a photo. So that could be a photo of a wound, it could be a photo of someone's fracture when they come in, or their assault, the details of their abrasions and things like that when they come into ED after an assault. And therefore, rather than having to find the case notes and hoping that what's been photographed goes into the case record, because it's not scanned at the moment, it could potentially go into the case record. So these are all the things which can happen within TrakCare. So it allows you to find all your patients, because if I go back into my priority workbench, which is my landing page, allows me to go to my current patients. And that would be any patients who are under my care anywhere in the hospital, not just in Ward 22. So again, at the moment we use paper lists to keep track of patients. As long as TRAC is updated as patients move through the flow from AMU into the wards or from ASRU under the care of a specialty, as long as it's correct data at that point, you'll know where your patients are. And you can link this together so that it's not only your patients, but the team, if you work in a team structure. In Reno, we work as one of us takes responsibility for the whole of Ward 22, and one of us takes responsibility for all the other patients that we have as boarders. And we take team responsibility. So I could link this with the 5 other Reno physicians so that the 6 of us, I can see a list of all the patients who are under our care. So rather than having that a bit of paper which then gets left on the floor in the concourse and gets into the front page of the telly with lots of patient information on it, you could have your list easily accessible on TrakCare. And that will come with the PAS being implemented. So those are some of the things that it can do for us. In terms of vetting, you vet from this page as well. So rather than having to access RMS as a separate application, you can vet directly from RMS from here. So if I go into my vetting list, there's preferences for all specialties, and there's people who've been vetted and not vetted here. So I'm just going to go into my preferences, because I don't want to see everyone who's been vetted. I just want to see those who are unvetted. So And I go into vetted priority and I search, and I put not vetted and update that. And then you'll see here that I have a list of the unvetted referrals at the moment. If I go down, I'll just hopefully find one which has got an e-referral. So if I go into this one here for Joanne Brown, she's got a referral for the breast clinic. I can see the e-referral here by clicking like that, and I can read it there. Or if I just want to see the referral and do the vetting at the same time, I click on the breast clinic there, and you'll see that I can see on one side of the screen the referral, and on the other side of the screen I can do my vetting. Now, obviously I can't vet for the breast clinic because I'm not a breast doctor, but I can put in that as Mr. Brown, and then a vetting outcome can go in there. So that vetting outcome is exactly the same as the vetting outcomes which are currently in RMS for your specialty. So I could put in breast clinic, cancer, and I could also update the GP if I wish to update the GP. So I can, if I click the Edit GP button, hopefully this will work in Scratch. It works in Base, and I update this. I should get a... No, I don't. I knew that wouldn't work. But if I'd sent the patient back to the GP and I'd cancelled the referral, it would have allowed me to send a letter back to the GP and type in the box why I was turning down that referral. And in the system that we're turning on, it will allow you to do that for all letter types. It isn't turned on in Scratch at the moment, but that's one of the things we've been talking about, because obviously quite often we want GPs to do stuff. We want to see the patient, but we might want the GP to do stuff in the interim so that when the patient comes to clinic, there's more information for the clinic visit to make the clinic visit more productive. So you could put in either a free text note, or what the dermatologists do is that they have a series of canned text notes. So they cut and paste from they've got a Word document which says, I think this might be this, please try A, B, C and D. We'll see the patient when we can, because they have long waiting lists at the moment. So they'll put in that information. You might say, if it's a nephrologist, could you organise an ultrasound please before they come to clinic? And then that letter goes via the electronic feed back to the general practitioner. So it doesn't go by paper, you don't have to sign it off or anything like that. It goes as an electronic document directly into the GP's inbox, for letters from clinic goes into the GP's inbox. So that's where we are with Track at the moment. I was hoping that you might have some questions, because that's taken... Usually I get, in a smaller audience, I get about 100 questions by now, and it takes an hour. James?
Really describe that takes a powerful system for the use of those data collection and patient safety.
Yeah.
One of the things that's very attractive here to not lose patients, and I see Richard saying that he's got borders in all the hospitals, not only in every ward in this hospital. Will there be a plan for a tablet or a mobile version of this for the employees in Ward 36 to be able to easily access when it's one your own hospital?
So, yes is the answer. There is a mobile version of TrakCare. It is not... is it out yet, Cliff, or is it in production for later on this year?
It's coming out later in 2018.
Yeah, so in the next version of Track, there'll be a specific mobile rendered version. Obviously, the amount of screen resolution you need for this is quite different, because it's quite a small screen size compared with some other applications. So you need to have a different rendering of it to make it easier to look at on a small mobile device. The thoughts are that there'll be different people need different devices for different purposes. So if you're doing EDDs, for example, be that on Track or on EDD, you need to sit down at a computer because you've got to type stuff in, and you need to be in a place which is quiet and without disturbance to do that well. Whilst if you're doing a ward round, it might be that you use a laptop on wheels, or you might use a Surface Pro to do that. So the question is what we're working through a bit of work to decide on what devices are the best devices for different jobs. If you're a nurse and we do vital signs recording, it might be that all you need is the mobile application and a small smart device, a mobile phone-sized device. If that all you're going to be doing is putting in blood pressures and things like that. But if you're doing a complex bit of work, you'll need a bigger device. And one of the issues is always what's the best device for a ward round, because you need to be able to have a screen which you can look at, x-rays ideally on the same screen as you're working on, so you need to have a decent quality screen to be able to do that. But there is a bit of work going on to get more devices and more entries out there. We're also thinking about how clinics will work, because if you're very static in your clinic, like most physicians are, that's great, but some of our surgical colleagues may go from, they'll have a nurse getting someone's legs ready for examination in a plastics clinic, and they'll need to be redressed, so they'll move on to another room, and they'll see the next patient in the next room, and etc. And do they want to be logged into 3 different computers, or do they want to be able to just carry their laptop between the 3 rooms rather than having to be logged on in multiple rooms? Or do they have a Surface device to do that? So we're thinking about that, and we're working through that with some of the clinics, and we're, part of the reason to do these talks is to get people to think about, well, will that work for me if I'm sitting in my clinic, or will it not work for me? If it won't work for me, how do I make it work for me better? We've had quite a lot of interaction with, say, ophthalmology, where people actually have free appointments. So they'll see the orthoptist, is it? To get their sort of their pressures done, or their visual fields and things like that, before they come to see the Caroline Cobb at the glaucoma clinic or something like that. And then they might have a third appointment after that to see a nurse. And it's about how you link up those free appointments, both within TRAC, but also within the workflow for that patient, so that the patient flows appropriately through those. So you have to arrive them at the 3 different clinics, and then who makes the decision? If you're outcoming 3 times, how do you do the outcome so you get consistent outcoming between the 3 different appointments on the same day, if the patient needs to see the same 3 people the next time? So we've been going around and looking at specialties. Over the next 6 or 8 weeks, we're going around all the specialties, and all the specialties are going to be asked to check off their clinics to ensure that their clinics match on Topaz and TrakCare, and also to think about the workflow for those clinics. So that may be A&C staff doing that. It may be that clinical staff will be asked to be involved with that validation of their clinic process. Alan, you may go to the toilet if you wish, or you may ask a question. I can hear you.
Just to talk a little bit more about clinics, which is familiar to me. Most people like me and my colleagues don't interrogate any electronic systems in advance, and we want a seamless, quick and easy interaction with electronic systems. Now, today, for example, I was dependent on probably half a dozen different systems in the clinic, 2 of which weren't working properly. So that might be an argument to change to the better. We know that EasyJet and online shopping is all very good and very sexy, and it works because they invest a lot of time and effort. So I suppose my question is, what market research has been done, and how are you going to ensure that these systems are user-friendly and good for the people that use them, and that they've been tested in the place by the users using the PC terminals and looked at in detail there? Because I suspect that some of the systems that we've tried to use in the past haven't been checked in that way, and haven't been better, simpler and quicker than the old systems, because that's what clinicians really want.
So I suppose in terms of market research, we're to some extent hamstrung by what the government allow us to use, but at the same time also by finances. There's 3 main EPR systems available on the international market. There's Epic, which is epic in many ways because it has an epic price bracket. It costs Addenbrooke's about £30 million a year to run their Epic system. So when you think about that per day, that's a huge amount of money per day to run an electronic patient record. There's a system called Cerner Millennium, and then there's TrakCare, are probably the 3 market leaders in the world. There's a company called Gartner, and Gartner's a business analytics company or market research company which looks at various different bits of the e-world. So not only in terms of enterprise electronic patient records, but also in terms of business analytics software or software to make for cars or whatever. So, and they look at that, and InterSystems is in the top 3 within that. So in terms of that, it's a fairly well-tried system. There's large parts of Chile, for example, have used it for general practice. They've got the whole of Chile general practice using TrakCare. It's installed across most of Scotland. Now, that hasn't worked as well because I think large parts of Scotland have taken the approach of using Track just as a patient admin system. Edinburgh has taken quite a different approach, and Aberdeen are using it in a different way to, say, Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So they're trying to use it more as an electronic patient record. As we develop stuff, Alan, we need to develop it with the clinicians so it works with clinicians. So we're building a form. We don't want lots of questions which aren't important on that form. We need the clinical details to be the right clinical details to put down on that and make it as quick and easy for the clinician. So as we move forward with this, there's a plan that we have a clinical advisory group which looks at what the priorities are in terms of what we build and which parts of it we turn on first, but also when we're building it, how we build it to make it clinician friendly. I'm not keen on the idea of just recording stuff electronically for the sake of recording stuff electronically. It's got to have a benefit for the patient and for or the staff member. You've got to remember that some of our patients end up travelling round Tayside, so they might get their CT scan or their procedure in Stracathro and then come back to Ninewells or Perth 2 weeks later for a clinic appointment. Though their notes need to travel with them at the moment for that, and quite often their notes don't arrive in the right place at the right time. So there's a significant number of patients who don't have their any case notes at clinic. And I think the better our electronic patient record is, the less chance we have of missing stuff and not knowing stuff about the patient. Track's built on a different platform in terms of its technology to, say, Clinical Portal, and certainly in all our testing has run much quicker across our current network. I did this demo on the Wi-Fi network today. We've demoed this using a laptop linked to a mobile phone across a VPN. I wrote this talk at home, or I wrote the demo at home on my virtual private network, and so it works really well, and it's much faster than our current applications on the whole. We haven't tested it in the full scale of a whole hospital deployment, but it appears to be a good application from the point of view of speed. In terms of what's going to happen over the next few weeks, if I go back to my slides, I think it's important to tell you that there is a degree of an approach to what we're doing to make sure that it all works. So the reason that we didn't go live in February was that we didn't have our data migration right. The InterSystems who provide TrakCare hadn't given us the final product because we'd asked for some critical changes, and they hadn't been able to deliver on those changes at the right time, which meant that we weren't able to do our data migration and data validation. Because of that, about 3 weeks before Track was due to go live, we said, we're never going to make it. It would be unsafe to do so, therefore we're not going to do it. So we're in a process of planning our go live at the moment. The go live will happen hopefully between the 21st and 27th of June, and then there'll be an enhanced business as usual, so there'll be increased support over the next week after that to ensure that the system beds in. We have a more detailed approach, which is that we have some pre-checks to ensure that the system is working okay, and then we have a period of time on the Friday when we turn off Topaz, RMS and any other systems which we need to turn off, and on that Friday to Saturday morning we're going to look at the data. So the data will be migrated into TrakCare from Topaz. There'll be a full eHealth team looking at, and business unit team looking at the validation of that data to make sure that the live data is correct. And at the end of that period of time, at 1 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon, we'll say, well, the data is there, it's validated, it's at 99 point something %, we can go ahead, or the data migration hasn't worked and the validation of it is poor, in which case we revert and we go back to using Topaz. And it's very clear that we're doing this in an approach which will allow us to ensure that we don't go ahead if we don't think it's safe to do so. And that's why we didn't go live in February. This is all the different streams, so we have to make sure that inpatients is working, the referrals is working, and the outpatients is working, and we can stop at any point and revert over that weekend. During the first week afterwards, the eHealth team and key support users who are users in each service who've been trained in detailed knowledge of TRAC will be about to help people in their clinical areas if they run into problems with using TRAC. There'll be an enhanced help desk service for that week as well to ensure that people can log on if people's log-ons don't work and things like that. There'll be people out walking the floor, so people out walking in the outpatient clinics, they'll be wearing pink T-shirts, I believe, because it was thought to be an obvious colour. And there'll be training support. All the training videos will be on the web, on the intranet, so if you forget how to do something, you'll be able to go back onto the intranet and look at it in small snippets. There'll be support going through the next week as well, and then we have a 30-day and a 90-day warranty with TrakCare. Those two warranties are all about ensuring that the system is working as it's meant to be working, and we don't want to make changes for the sake of making changes during those first 90 days because we want to have a stable system which is working well. So that's our plan in terms of our go live. But if it doesn't work, if it's not working a couple of weeks beforehand, we won't be going live. Richard?
Is it possible to make specialised lists? So I'm thinking about NDTs. Is it possible to put people together into a list?
Yeah, so in terms of the cancer tracking, for example, Edinburgh have a cancer tracking form which we've pinched the format of. We have to rebuild it because we use a different version of TRAC to them. But it will allow you to look at cancer tracking, but also potentially allow you to record MDT decisions within cancer tracking, or you could build potentially, if you have a form that you wish, if you have a standard pro forma for, say, the interstitial lung disease MDT, you could build that pro forma within TRAC, and it'd have to be, you'd have to put a submission into the clinical advisory group, and then it would be prioritised and it would go into the list of things to be done. But there's going to be, rather than us having lots of application support for lots of different apps going forward, there's going to be a focus on supporting TRAC and building within TRAC. So there'll be a team whose job it is to do that. So it'd be put on their list of work, and potentially you'd get your interstitial lung disease MDT form within TrakCare. And it's a good way of then documenting, recording the data, rather than having to dictate a letter or have it on the radiology system, for example. Hi, Sarah.
So you told us that the software works faster and it works on Wi-Fi, etc. But some of the hardware that I work on is incredibly slow. My computer in my office, to turn it on, it takes 10 minutes to warm up. Even opening the program takes 2 or 3 minutes. So I love this idea of being able to link directly to ICE, etc. But if it takes 2 or 3 minutes each time to follow that link, it becomes unfeasible.
It doesn't. Certainly on our testing so far, it doesn't take that long to link in.
I tested it on a really rubbish mainstream computer like Camden told you, and also in paediatric outpatients, it's normal likewise. It's just...
I've given demos of this in the outpatient clinic rooms in Perth, Alan, and it works okay there. If it take, can I ask, is it when you go out control delete and then it takes 10 minutes to log in from there, or is it actually getting it to turn on? Pressing it. Okay. Is that in your outpatient clinic or is that in your office?
The worst one is my office, but the outpatient clinic is similar.
Because, there's simple, I know it sounds terrible, but there are some simple practical things such as when people arrive and, part of the job of the first nursing clinic in the morning should be to turn on all the computers so that all the computers are on and ready at the out control delete button stage for when clinicians arrive. There is an infrastructure budget to buy more kit, but it's not a limitless budget, unfortunately. Cliff can probably talk more about that. Yeah. Because a lot of computers needed extra memory when the the latest version of what Windows 7 went in, and had a lot of computers had extra memory put in at that stage, but maybe not. Any other questions? Deans?
How do you get a questionnaire constructed for your service?
So, questionnaires is going to be a large part of it. I think there's different bits. You need to critically appraise what you want on that questionnaire. And once you've got your critically appraised list of what you want on your questionnaire, you then submit it to the clinical advisory group for discussion, and then it would be prioritised. And from that, you would build your questionnaire. Part of the building of a questionnaire is not just building a questionnaire, but building the reporting to go along with the questionnaire, so that you get the either research or the business analytics that you need out of that questionnaire as well. There's no point having a questionnaire if we've not built the reporting tools to go along with that questionnaire.
And could that output tie in with the output from EMIS, as we'll have questionnaires on the same subject coming from both systems?
Potentially, you would be able to, if the questionnaire had exactly the same format, ClickView can potentially aggregate data from different sources as long as it has the same format, is my understanding. Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
It's really hard work because it's quite a big job.
Yes.
What's that? Yeah. If you get access. So one of the Nick George, one of the eye doctors, he was warning about his condition of PRI and his profile, and I went to his office and he was in PRI, and it took me less than I think about 45 seconds to log on. Nick seemed to take me 15 minutes to log on. You can't add then I said to me to get the profile, so I got to a help desk call, and you read the profile. I probably raised a help desk call.
see this study now as a classic